jaslama dječjim rasti i cvijetaj zemljoradnih ljudi i neka mir nad tvojim ljudima vlada. Mir tvojim lađama napući i tvome danu što se vedar budi. Rasti sretna da svi narodi vide sa strana svega i sjevera kako se rađa i kako se voli, kako se brani zemlja proletera. Rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Tvojim ljudima vlada, i tvom rudaru i tvome rataru. Mir graditelju i tvom čuvaru, mir tvojoj sreći u vodi i u zraku, u pjesmi strojeva i u sjaju žita.
Sorry.
до самых окраин, южный гор до северных морей. Человек проходит как хозяин необъятной родины своей. Тут жизнь невольна и широка, точно Волга полная течет. Молодым везде у нас дорога, старикам везде у нас почет. Страна моя родная, молодые, полторы, я другой такой страны не знаю, я такой на весь человек. Я другой такой страны не знаю, я такой на весь человек. За столом никто у нас не лишний, по заслугам каждый награжден. Золотыми буквами мы пишем всенародный сталинский закон. Этих слов величие и славу никакие годы не сотрут. Человек всегда имеет право на учение, подвиг и на труд. Страна моя родная, молодые, полторы, я другой такой страны не знаю, я такой на весь человек. Я другой такой страны не знаю, я такой на весь человек. Над страной весенний ветер веет, каждым днем все радостнее жить. И никто на свете не умеет лучше нас смеяться и любить. Но сурово брови мы насупим, если враг захочет нас сломать. Как небесную родину мы любим, бережем, как ласковую мать. Страна моя родная, молодые, полторы, я другой такой страны не знаю, я такой на весь человек. Я другой такой страны не знаю, я такой на весь человек. Сили ce știm noi din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și sfut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce înseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de-i prin am priceput, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome along. It is a election special for you today. We, of course, have had the earth-shattering revelation that our beloved Prime Minister, a certain Mr. Rishi Sunak, alleged human being, and who has the physical consistency of a mouldering stick of celery in a ill-fitting suit. And of course we had the devastating response from the world's greatest statesman, Sir Keir Starmer, and he really did earn that title, a man who always resembles a sweating tub of lard poured into another ill-fitting suit, which probably cost the British taxpayer an awful lot of money. So we will, if you haven't guessed it already, be spending some time today talking about the inglorious farce that is the British general election, which will take place on the 4th of July. That's around about 6 weeks' time. I bet that Rishi Sunak, giving away his true intentions there, picked the Independence Day in the United States because he'll probably be on the plane to the United States as soon as the election's over, because he sure as hell ain't sticking around this place. So we will begin in just a moment by looking at the speeches of our esteemed leader, Mr. Rishi Sunak, and the leader of the so-called opposition, a certain alleged human, Keir Starmer. So we will begin in just a moment, but first of all, I hope you enjoyed the fact that the music is back, and you got uplifted by some Soviet and communist power ballads before being brought down to earth again by the miserable reality of bourgeois democracy, so-called. But we will do our traditional, of course, greeting of those in the chat so far before we get into the business at hand. If you have any questions, be sure to queue them up, and I'll get to them after we've gone through the inspiring speeches of the leaders of British imperialism. So we have Banana Bender who's with us, we have Hector who's with us, we have Jenny, and we have Jawad. Good evening to you, comrade. We also have Luca, who says that this is the music, that is what freedom sounds like, and indeed Luca is correct. We have James Graham with us, and we have comrade Ian Foster with us as well. Boyo says that's Alex singing, and I'm going to say to you the same thing I always say, which is stand by for my solo album. Terry Eaton, good evening to you, comrade. We also have here, Yu Wan, who joins us from Phoenix, Arizona. Davey, who joins us, I think, from Wales. And we also have Hector, who comments, I've just finished reading Austerity Britain. Is that the Kynaston book? History of Britain after World War II. I have to say the Labour Party is a party of grovelling canutes. Well, that's a polite way of putting it, but yes, you are correct. James Graham comments that the British election is the big sleep. Well, it might be the big meltdown this time. We will see how things turn out. Austin Reynolds is with us, as is Richard, as is Michael. And Ben joins us from Hungary. And the Boyo says, Rishi Sunak has entered the chat. Well, he's welcome on the programme. He's welcome to join our election coverage. I will be submitting an interview request to Conservative Party Central Office, as I will be doing for Keir Starmer. I will be applying to both of the major parties in this country and saying that their so-called leaders should come on the programme for an interview. We also have with us Peter, who joins us from Perfidious Albion, popping in before heading off to bed for an early start in the morning. Good to have you with us, even if briefly. We have Svetlana joining us from midnight in Moscow. Good to have you with us here. We have also joining us Mike Martinez and Steve Choate from Georgia, USA. GL is with us, as is Michael from West Belfast. Ben asks, is it true that one of the top contenders for Klaus Schwab's now vacant spot at the top of the World Economic Forum is Tony fucking Blair? It would be so damn fitting. I think he's the ideal candidate. I hope he gets it. He looks like a slimy lizard in a human costume, a barely fitting human costume. So absolutely ideal man. Give him the job now. And if you could appoint the ghost of Jimmy Savile as his assistant, I mean, you'd have the absolutely ideal men in the job. Spurious Furious joins us from Vancouver Island, Canada. And we also have a comment here from Steve who says, "You're my favourite British communist if you don't count Jyoti Brar and her father." Well, I'll take third place in that list. And to answer Svetlana's question, no, I wasn't spending all the time selecting what tie to wear because I only have 3. Stripy, single colour, and black. I'll wear the black one in commemoration of something. It'll have to be a very special occasion. Abtin is with us, as is Austin, and President Jesus has joined us, and as has Potted Rodent. Colchester Ian is here. Ben is enjoying the British vocabulary. Stay tuned, there's a lot more to come. Shanish is here, as is Otis and Brad Wall. Salon No Mind says, "Evening, lads," and I say evening back to you. Older Larkin is with us from Dublin. Marrow Mind is joining us from Liverpool. Good to have you with us. President Jesus asked, "Did Paul Mason lose again?" Well, we have to wait and see. He's applied for the position of prospective. He's a prospective parliamentary candidate, meaning that he's applied to be the official Labour candidate in Islington North, which is Corbyn's seat at the moment. So we'll have to see whether his application is accepted. I think that even Keir Starmer's not going to want him, because why would you? He's such an open rat that even for someone like Starmer, that's too much. Starmer prefers pliable, petty bourgeois idiots. Now, Mason is an idiot and he is a petty bourgeois, but he's such a slime bag. He has such an abysmal reputation that he would be probably too much even for Keir Starmer to stomach. And that's quite something to say. But we'll see. Maybe they'll. If Corbyn stands, Corbyn will probably win. I mean, for all that I detest the man's politics with a passion, he does, according to people who do know these things and whose opinion I do respect, he does have a significant and quite genuine local popularity as a constituency MP. So, whoever Labour put up, he's probably going to lose. So maybe Keir Starmer will decide, well, I'll stick MI6 Mason up there as the shit magnet, and he can get pelted with rancid tomatoes for 6 weeks, and then we'll just bury Corbyn on the back benches if we get into government. And Corbyn will be like an isolated voice, and it won't matter. So we'll see. Abtin says, "As we speak about democracy in our miserable countries, take a look at the masses in Iran mourning the deceased leadership." Well, whatever you think of the reputation of the late President Raisi, I can't see that number of people turning out for the funeral of Keir Starmer, ever, or Rishi Sunak, or indeed any British Prime Minister post Churchill, really. Apparently, according to Comrade Ian Foster, Paul Mason didn't even make the shortlist. Oh God, he's going to keep trying. The thing with Mason is he's been of such service to the British establishment and the intelligence services that he probably feels like he's owed a safe seat now. I've done all these betrayals for you. I've tried to wreck all these movements. I've been your spy for so many years. Aren't I owed a position? I mean, he may get into the House of Lords, maybe, if Keir's feeling particularly generous. Ben enjoys the antics of the current defence minister, a certain Mr. Shapps. Well, Mr. Shapps has several different names, including a certain other identity known as Michael Green. So he has many different identities. He goes by many different names, but he's always a dumbass fraudster. But then again, so is the rest of his party. Hector says Corbyn is a big bag of wind, certainly, and he's been one for 60 years, so why would he change now? Greetings to David, who joins us. We have Michael, who says Mick and Claire on earlier with Makuris and Deason, good, but I think they're still criticising Russia. Yeah, I would vote for both of them, but I'm very well aware of the limitations of their politics. I did meet Claire Daly briefly a number of years ago. And the reason for it is because I think Mick Wallace was apolitical. I think he was even a property developer or something who went bankrupt in the in the financial crisis of 2008 to 2010, and then got radicalised by it and ran for the Irish Parliament, the Dáil. Claire Daly came out of the Irish Trotskyite tradition, of which more about Trotskyism and its rebrands tomorrow, when we do our Stalin episode, at least in our Stalin series. But the Trotskyite tradition, even it leaves its mark on people, even those who have slightly better politics, as Claire Daly undoubtedly does on many issues. But she's still stuck in that idea that this is a sort of clash between imperialist powers, and is still putting forward sort of broadly pacifist positions. I think she uses the platform. Her and Wallace used the platform of the European Parliament pretty well to expose the European Commission, to expose von der Leyen, and to expose their machinations. And they've done a good job over the Gaza war, mostly. So, I mean, if I were Irish and I had to vote on this, I would vote for both of them, even knowing their limitations. But yeah, Michael's point is right. They're still very much behind the curve on Russia. Richard says Labour still have 100 candidates to fill. Well, they'll probably just tap into the reserve of idiots that they've got, who are provided to them by the union bureaucracy. That would be my guess. Luca says, why have they called the general election on such short notice? Who's going to benefit the most from this? Well, I mean, it's a 6-week campaign. Generally speaking, election campaigns in Britain aren't that much longer than 6 weeks. The last one was about 6 or 7 weeks. I remember the one in 2015 was about 6 weeks. I know, because I blew all my annual leave campaigning in for my my last parliamentary campaign. And so it's generally 6 weeks. And who benefits the most from it? Well, the government in Britain always has an advantage in that they do under the current set of laws, because they did experiment with fixed term parliaments for a while, but it didn't really work for them. So before that, and also they've reverted to this system now, the government of the day could call an election anytime they pleased. So they could leave it for 5 years, or they could call it after 1 year, or 6 months if they really wanted to. So they always have the advantage in the sense of they get to plan out their campaign far in advance. I mean, there had to be an election by law within 6 months or so, by January of next year, so 7 months. And the benefit of calling it now is that it was slightly unexpected. I think a lot of people were expecting Sunak to go to the end of the year. But there was, as Sunak will say in his ridiculous speech, which we will look at in just a moment, the economic numbers improved a tiny amount, and that was probably the best news he was going to have. And so they decided this was the best time to do it in a slightly unexpected way. And I think also they might have been encouraged by the recent local election results, which, don't get me wrong, they still lost. But Labour did not do anything like as well as the ridiculous polling data that's been coming in for months and months, years now, would appear to tell us. See, as we said when the local election results came in, Labour's vote share has been massively overestimated in the opinion polls. If you look at the local election results, yes, they came out as the single largest party, but they're not winning enough. They weren't winning enough votes. They weren't getting enough votes coming over to them from the Tories or coming into them from other sources to actually build a workable majority. According to the way the votes broke down in the local election, if that's mirrored in the general, then they probably will end up as the single largest party, but won't have enough for a majority. And I think that the Tories will have looked at that and thought, well, if it's a choice between losing but losing to a very weak Labour government that will be almost instantly despised, then we'll take that, because we can probably come back within the lifetime of a parliament or before then. We can get ourselves sorted out, basically. So I think they've decided to go for it based on partially on the fact that Labour didn't do as well in the local elections as they would need to indicate they were going to be able to build a majority government. Slightly improved, but still bad economic picture. A slight reduction in the rate of inflation, but of course prices haven't fallen and indeed will not. But they had just enough good news to justify it. And if they waited much longer, the news wasn't going to get any better. And so I think it's for those reasons, like the Labour Party underperforming in the local elections and a slight improvement in the economic news that they will try and spin to the country. It won't win them the election, but I think their only plan isn't to win. I think their plan is to just lose, but not as badly. CE183 says, do you think communism is possible with popular support in the UK? Voters seem to be allergic to Corbyn. Well, I mean, communism is a hell of a lot different to the discredited social democracy of Jeremy Corbyn. So, tell you what, CE183, I will take your question and I'll address it in a Q&A, because like if we get into that, we're going to be going off on a tangent. But I will come back to it because you raised some interesting points. Morgan says, Mick Wallace has a mixed past. His business dealings are used by Trots as an excuse not to platform him. As for Daley, you won't find a better person to deliver the necessary messages. Yeah, I mean, Wallace certainly has his flaws. Daley's politics have their flaws as well. But in terms of two people who'll use that platform, I don't think you're going to find better, as Morgan states in his comment. A Northern Comrade joins us from the rain-soaked northeast. Good to have you with us. Right, okay, so what? I'm going to take the rest of the comments later on, but we are now going to get into an analysis of the speeches of the relevant arseholes. So, first of all, we're going to be looking at the speech of our beloved leader, Mr. Rishi Sunak, a former banker and Silicon Valley enthusiast. So, let's add him to the stage now.
Be judged by some government act.
And make sure that we're appropriately rewound. So here's Sunak outside of Downing Street earlier on today. And we will see what he has to say for himself. We may have to interject at various different points. If there's a problem with the volume, and if you can't hear the audio, do let me know.
In the last 5 years, our country has fought through the most challenging times since the Second World War. As I stand here as your Prime Minister...
How is that a selling point, by the way? Like, if you're going to start your election address with, well, the last 5 years have basically been a disaster, then you haven't got a lot of positive things to say.
I can't help but reflect that my first proper introduction to you was just over 4 years ago. I stood behind one of the podiums, upstairs in the building behind me.
Worth just pausing on that, because he's actually right there, which is that he came into the public vision around about 4 years ago, just after the Tories won the 2019 election, late 2019 election. So he's gone in 4 years from being a nobody to being Prime Minister. Now, to give you an indication of the scale of which the degeneration here, used to be that like the leadership in Britain had to serve a long apprenticeship before you were allowed to become Prime Minister. Like Margaret Thatcher had been an MP for over 20 years by the time she became Prime Minister. She'd served in a cabinet position. So, like, she'd been around in Parliament for over 2 decades, first running for Parliament in the middle of the 1950s before she got the big chair. John Major had been around and had been in many of the big offices of state I think he'd been in for 15 years. Blair had been in for 14 years as an MP. Brown, similar. It really sort of started to change with David Cameron, because David Cameron He went from becoming an MP in 2001 to becoming leader of the Conservative Party in 2005 to being leader to being Prime Minister in 2010. That's a 9-year turnaround. Then you get, of course, Theresa May, who'd been around for quite some time but was a complete disaster. And then you have Boris, he'd been in the public eye for almost for about 17 years or so. That he was on chat. He used to turn up on chat shows as when he was a journalist in like the early 2000s. There's an infamous one of him on the old Parkinson chat show where he's being like brutally mocked by the late Sean Connery, which is quite funny. Connery turns to him at one point and says, "Well, you got to take it as it comes, Boris, as I'm sure you did at Eton." Johnson just looks humiliated. It's quite funny. So anyway, yes, he 4 years ago he was a nobody. Then after 3 years he becomes prime minister, and he personifies a certain rot in the ruling class institutions because he's clearly incapable of filling the position that he's in. He's not a particularly good performer, which is required for, or should be required, to fulfill these positions. If you're going to spout the kind of bullshit he's about to spout, you better be a good actor. Like Obama, good actor. Slimebag Blair, good actor. Ham-faced Cameron, decent actor. Rishi, Keir Starmer, terrible actors. Anyway, let's continue.
I told you that we faced a generation-defining moment and that we as a society would not be judged by some government action, but by the small acts of kindness that we showed one another.
That's completely bullshit phrase. So what? Society's gone to hell, the country's falling apart, but I held a door open for somebody yesterday, so I guess everything must be going well. It's the kind of like stupid bullshit that appeals to like the poverty-stricken mindset of the British petty bourgeoisie. Well, somebody was personally pleasant to me yesterday, so I guess everything must be going fine. Don't get me wrong, good manners are all very well and good, but I mean, this is the kind of like dumb phraseology that he's using in this speech.
You met that challenge, and then some. And I have...
Did we? How, exactly? Oh, well, I suppose what he's referring to there is the COVID period, which he'll come to in just a moment.
Never been prouder to be British. And when I introduced the first...
Notice he looked down there. He's not proud, by the way. And this isn't just about him. I mean, the entire political establishment in this country, not just Sunak, who had a green card for the United States, of course, Starmer too, Blair, Boris Johnson, Cameron, none of them are proud to be British. They all want to be American. This is the truth. Like, I mean, maybe David Cameron would be proud of being British when he's out fox hunting. But like all these guys, like if you look at the way they style themselves, the way they present themselves, the way they are just shameless worshippers of imperialist power, they don't want to be British. They want to be American. Keir Starmer desperately wants to be American, but of course Hollywood's not recruiting right now. So you notice he looks down when he says that because he's not proud in the slightest. For Rishi Sunak, Britain is essentially a place where his money sits. And that's it. That's all it means. Not just to him, but those of his class. And for Keir Starmer, it's a career ladder, nothing more.
Scheme. I did so not because I saw a country simply in need of desperate help, albeit we were, but because I saw a country whose future hung in the balance. I could be bold and trust in the tens of millions of you at home that you would rise to the moment. Or I could accept the inevitable, millions of job losses, and pick up the pieces. In truth, it was no choice at all. I have never and will never leave the people of this country to face the darkest of days alone. And you know that because you've seen it.
He will. He'll be on the first plane out as soon as the election loss comes in. He'll go to America, where he actually wants to be. Trust me on this one.
As I did then, I will forever do everything in my power to provide you with the strongest possible protection I can. That is my promise.
Did he mean to sound like an advert for condoms just then? Is he selling prophylactics now? Because that's a rather disturbing thought.
To you. Because for so many of us, it's easy to forget the scale of what we've been through. We were hit by a pandemic that upended normal life.
Hang on a minute. And here we will get into controversial territory. He says, we were hit by a pandemic that upended normal life. Okay. The thing is, though, it wasn't the pandemic as such that upended normal life. As we covered extensively at the time on the original version of this program, when I was co-presenting the podcast version of this with Layla, it wasn't the pandemic itself that upended everything. It was the government's handling of it. And he was part of that government, but he's now trying to say that he's almost trying to distance himself from it when he goes on to talk about this further. Let's go forward, though.
Who would have thought that the government would ever tell us how many times a day we could leave our homes? Then, just as we were recovering from COVID...
So, who would have thought the government would tell you how many times a day you could leave your home? Well, your government did, Rishi. And Keir Starmer, of course, agreed with it. But he said, well, who would have thought that? Well, you did it. So I guess you must have thought it then. Unless you're trying to pin the whole thing on Boris Johnson. So you notice it's a verbal trick he's using there. He's trying to claim that he's some great success because he's protected Britain from something. But at the same time, he's trying to distance himself from some of the most unpopular decisions. And the whole lockdown thing was a very unpopular with the Conservative Party's own petty bourgeois base. And, of course, very unpopular amongst large sections of the working class. Like the anti-lockdown demonstrations I attended in Manchester back in 2020, late 2020, 2021. They were overwhelmingly working class. Yes, there was some petty bourgeois right-wingers and eccentrics there. But a lot of them were like temporary workers, people who'd been laid off, people who had been chucked out of work, who've been left like dangling on like inadequate furlough payments for months on end, and were heartily pissed off about it. And of course, that's before we even get to the perhaps even bigger scandal, which is of course that the British government, like the US government, just used it as a chance to throw money at the most powerful financial institutions in the country, unlimited amounts of money, basically in order to paper over the cracks that were developing in the economy, to flood the system with cash to make sure that a recession that was brewing in late 2019 was staved off, which is what they used COVID for in the United States. Remember, October 2019, Trump starts banging the drum for quantitative easing to be amped up again because there's a panic in the bond markets in late autumn 2019. Then COVID comes along, and of course they flooded the Wall Street with money with government money in order to paper over that and in order to cover it up. So they used COVID to essentially cover up a recession, and basically we all paid for it.
War returned to Europe, with Putin's invasion of Ukraine sending your energy bills spiraling.
Now, you notice how even he can't keep a straight face when he says that. He's doing that sort of sucked-in look of a man who knows he's lying. Because, of course, we all know, of us on this stream will know very well that it wasn't Putin's invasion of Ukraine that sent the energy bills spiraling. It was, of course, the sanctions regime, which he's an enthusiastic proponent of. Even he knows he's lying. You can tell by the look on his face.
I came to office, above all, to restore economic stability.
Well, you know what? It is essentially very stable when the patient is dead. So in that sense, the British economy being a corpse, he has succeeded in this aim.
Economic stability is the bedrock of any future success, whether that is rising wages and good jobs, investment in our public services, or the defence of the country.
Well, failed on all counts there, Rishi. So this isn't the advert you were hoping for.
And because of our collective sacrifice and your hard work, we have reached 2 major milestones in delivering that stability.
Right. There is not collective sacrifice here. I mean, the inflation spiral over the last few years, the continual price rises when it comes to energy, and all the other things that have gone on. This is, of course, a class war waged by the class that Rishi Sunak represents, and, of course, on the working class and even on the petty bourgeoisie to a certain extent. So this is, unmitigated bullshit, of course. I mean, he's not going to stand there and tell you that, yes, we're waging a class war on you all and I'm winning. But they tap into this language of shared sacrifice. The British leaders always do this. They always try to conjure up the World War II bullshit because it was the last time that any idea of shared sacrifice was remotely believable. It's not been believable since then.
Showing that when we work together, anything is possible. Our economy is now growing faster than anyone predicted, outpacing...
It's growing by a whopping 0.4% compared to the prediction, which is 0.1%. So great stuff, Rishi, given that he was finance minister and then prime minister. This is a great triumph for him. By the way, the Chinese economy, even according to the World Bank, is projected to grow at 5.2% this year. So that's even according to figures from an imperialist institution. Well done on the 0.4% there, lad. Great job.
In Germany, France, and the United States. And this morning it was confirmed that inflation is back to normal. Right.
I mean, how on earth he expects to get away with that lie, I don't know. Because, inflation is back to normal. It doesn't cancel out all of the price rises that have taken place over the last 2 years. The fuel bills still gone through the roof. And now the privatized water companies in Britain are talking about rises in price of up to 91% price rises. So this unmitigated bullshit, even his own petty bourgeois base isn't going to believe him. So he has to try and sell this, because this is all he's got to say. What's he going to do? Go up there and tell the truth?
This means that the pressure on prices will ease and mortgage rates will come down. This is proof.
By the way, another look down and look shamefaced there. He's not a good actor. He's not selling this well at all.
That the plan and priorities I set out are working. I recognise that it has not always been easy. Some of you will only just be starting to feel the benefits.
No. What an absolute twat, seriously.
And for some, it might still be hard when you look at your bank balance. But this hard-earned economic stability...
It's hard when Rishi looks at his bank balance because it's hard to actually fit that many zeros on an A5 sheet of paper or indeed an app on your phone.
It was only ever meant to be the beginning. The question now is how and who do you trust to turn that foundation into a secure future for you, your family, and our country. Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future. To decide whether we want to build on the progress we have made or risk going back to square one with no plan and no certainty. Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July. This election will take place at a time when the world is more dangerous than it has been since the end of the Cold War. Putin's Russia is waging a brutal war in Ukraine, and will...
Wait for it, because that's the shot. There's a chaser coming right up.
Will not stop there if he succeeds. That war has also made it all too clear the risk to our energy security.
By the way, energy security in this country is at risk because, successive governments, both Tory and Labour, destroyed the coal industry and then privatised and allowed the nuclear industry to be destroyed as well. So, he's going on about energy security there. Yeah, well, the entire ruling class basically allowed that to be destroyed because it was more profitable to buy it in from elsewhere. They didn't want to invest in clean coal. They didn't want to invest in nuclear. They can just about summon up some enthusiasm to invest in like scams over renewable energy, but mostly they've just bought it in from elsewhere. Better to just buy it in from elsewhere than actually have to do serious investment into infrastructure, into energy infrastructure, because that costs money and doesn't deliver an immediate return. Just buy it from elsewhere. So this is complete bullshit. All right? If there's a crisis of energy supply in this country, which indeed there is, then it's the collective responsibility of all the political parties, and of course reflects the priorities of the British ruling class, of whom he is an enthusiastic servant.
In the Middle East, the forces of Islamist extremism threaten regional and ultimately global stability. These tensions are exploited by...
So, see what he did there? Gloucester, he said, Putin's waging a barbaric war. Now, we've covered this many times before. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. Compare the way that the Russians have fought the war in Ukraine with the way that the Israelis, with, by the way, the full participation of the British imperialists under Sunak's leadership, have fought the war on Gaza. The Israelis have waged a genocidal war on a civilian population. The Russians have not done that. There are a gigantic amount of Ukrainian combat casualties, and if one of your loved ones has died horribly for NATO, that's not going to be much of a consolation. But to do this, to present the Russian war, which has the Russians have gone out of their way to not bomb civilian areas, to actually allow civilian evacuations of every place they come up to say that that's the brutal war, but then you get the exact opposite case in Gaza, which is carpet bombing civilian areas, mass slaughter of children, to gloss over that and say, oh, it's Islamist extremism. This man is a gargantuan and contemptible liar. I was previously like, I just didn't really pay that much attention to him. But every time I do pay attention to him, I'm reminded of like the vileness of him, his party, and his class. A contemptible individual.
Extremists who seek to undermine our values and divide our society here at home.
And what the fuck are those values? I mean, I know I've said this before when last time we looked at a speech of his. And again, he doesn't believe what he's saying. Look at his face. He doesn't believe what he's saying. Because I don't think he's a stupid man. I think he's been given a script to read and he's not a good actor. What are those values? The values that Britain, the British ruling class, I should say, stand for are on full display in Gaza. Those values are the mass murder of children, the carpet bombing of civilian areas, and the roving death squads executing anybody they fancy. That's the values he actually stands for. And so it would be appropriate if, of course, the suit wasn't covered in rain, it was covered in blood, because that's what he actually stands for. He is an active participant in the genocide. And as Senator Lindsey Graham was getting worried about earlier today, if Netanyahu can be indicted and convicted, then so can we. So should Sunak. Sunak has provided surveillance aircraft, allegedly hospital facilities to the Israeli armed forces. Allegedly, according to some reporting by Declassified UK, they've also been providing direct military assistance. British citizens have participated in the genocide by serving in the Israeli army. Those are the values. Oh, that, and of course aiding the mass slaughter of Ukrainians by propping up the dictatorship in Kiev. Those are the values. And by the way, Keir Starmer will tell you in just a moment that he agrees with all of this.
China is looking to dominate the 21st century by stealing a lead in technology.
Oh my good God. Like, I mean, it's pathetic. I mean, he's like, this is like, I said this on Twitter, this is like a remix of all the speeches by every British Prime Minister I can remember, going all the way back to like John Major. In fact, he makes John Major look like fucking Bismarck, you know? But of course, the Chinese didn't steal this. You know, they got agreements from Western companies to do co-developing on certain technologies. So it wasn't even how it was presented to us. Like when I was an undergraduate and we were doing Chinese politics as a module in my political science course. It was presented as the Chinese cunningly tricked the imperialists into giving up their technological secrets. But no, what they insisted on, the Chinese, was that the imperialists could come there, they could exploit Chinese labor at ridiculously high rates of profit, but they had to agree to co-development with Chinese businesses, often state-owned enterprises and sometimes private sector. So the imperialists willingly signed those deals on the dotted line, and as far back as 1980, with I think the first co-development was Volkswagen doing a joint project with a Chinese state-owned automaker. I think I'm right in saying that. And so they all voluntarily signed these contracts to co-develop with Chinese companies. But of course, so far gone on their own chauvinism and so hungry for the profit that could be made off exploiting Chinese labor, that they completely failed to realize that co-development meant just that, which is that they would be co-developing things with the Chinese companies, who would then, of course, learn all these technological secrets completely legally and under the terms which had been agreed under the contract. They didn't steal it. It's all been done according to the law, according to the contracts that these capitalists signed with the Chinese. So it's an absurd lie. The thing is that these idiots never expected the Chinese to actually develop to the point where they could outperform the imperialist countries, and now they're all fucking crying about it. It's absolutely pathetic, contemptible nonsense.
And migration is being weaponized by hostile states to threaten the integrity of our borders.
Right. Okay. I mean, we're going to have to speed this up a little bit, maybe in a minute, but because I'll have to stop every 5 seconds. But the migration crisis was caused by, in many respects, well, guess who? It was the government that he served in. Well, he wasn't. I don't think he was even an MP back then. He came into Parliament in 2015, Rishi, but his Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, back when he was plain old Mr. Cameron, of course, helped to create the migration crises by doing what? Destroying the Libyan government, and also then trying to destroy the Syrian government. And, of course, continuing the occupation of Afghanistan, continuing the immiseration of Iraq. And that's before we even get to the devastating impact that imperialism has on countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So the migration crises that he's fucking talking about, and always they're like the reactionary buffoons in this country are always yammering about, they created it. They created it. So, like, threatening our borders, what? Somebody's weaponizing migration? Is it Putin, perhaps? No. The mass migration crisis, as he puts it, if indeed you can classify it as one, this was created by the British ruling class via their chosen medium of the Conservative Party. Oh, by the way, the Labour Party would have done exactly the same thing before anybody tries to make that point. That is always going to be applied to these cases. So it's a crisis they created and a crisis that they continually exploit by getting these desperate people into Britain and using them as hyper-exploitable sources of labour and thus of profit. So this is the hypocrisy and the lying is constant. And even for me, having watched these fucking clowns for years now, it's still staggering that he tries to get away with this stuff. Again, though, not a good actor. Blair would have been a much better performer with this material.
These uncertain times call for a clear plan and bold action to chart a course to a secure future. You must choose in this election who has that plan, who is prepared to take the bold action necessary.
Oh, he's getting angry. He's getting passionate now. It's like being being assailed by a particularly sort of stoat-like bank manager.
To secure a better future for our country and our children. Now, I cannot and will not.
Which country is that, Rishi? This one or the one you're going to move to when all of this goes wrong? And by the way, America's not looking too good an investment these days either, buddy. You may want to reconsider.
Claim that we have got everything right.
Yes, to answer Ben's question, that's what passes for passion. I mean, he only really gets passionate when he's looking at his bank account.
No government should. But I am proud of what we have achieved together, the bold actions we have taken, and I'm confident about what we can do in the future. We've tackled inflation, controlled debt, cut workers' taxes, and increased the state pension by £900. We've reduced taxes on investment and seized the opportunities of Brexit to make this the best country in the world to grow a business.
Oh my fucking God. I'm not even going to touch that one. I just wanted to laugh.
Put record amounts of funding into our NHS and ensured...
Okay, I am going to touch that one. Record amounts of funding into the NHS. I mean, Starmer will try and say something different to this, but the funding that goes into the NHS, gigantic amounts of it. If you're not familiar with what NHS stands for, it's National Health Service. It's the state-run healthcare provision in Britain. Been around since 1948. Slowly being destroyed over many, many years. But one of the big things that they've done over the last 25 years is cripple it with gigantic amounts of debt. And they did that. This was done by the Labour Party, by the way, by building new facilities, destroying the old state-owned facilities, knocking them down, having the private sector build and own the new infrastructure. And then the state essentially pays a ruinous amount of mortgage payments to the private companies over like a 30-year period. And that not only transfers state assets to the private sector, it also enables a continuous revenue stream for these private sector parasites based on like the continued paying out of these basically mortgage payments by the state. And this debt is loaded upon the NHS. And so all this new money they keep announcing is going in. Huge amounts of it just go to service the debt that the last Labour governments loaded onto the health service in the first place. So that's a shorthand for describing what's going on. I will return to the NHS and so-called private finance initiative under which these debts were accumulated in a future programme.
It is now training the doctors and nurses it needs in the decades to come.
Well, I don't know about training them. They've not made training medical personnel that much easier. They've made it more difficult in many respects. What he means, though, is that they're stealing them from other countries. That's one of the big things that they're doing to plug the recruitment crisis, which is offering relatively advantageous terms to people from the Philippines, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and other nations to come over here and work in the NHS. So basically that they don't have to train them and they just buy them in from elsewhere. That's what they're actually doing.
We've reformed education and our children are now the best readers in the Western world.
How the hell do you qualify that? Our children are now the best readers in the Western world. What have we done, like a giant spelling bee or something? I mean, it's a ridiculous claim. I mean, you can tell again, he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe any of this. He's thinking of being in Silicon Valley. He's thinking of how great it would be to have dinner with Elon Musk, or perhaps do mushrooms with Elon Musk.
We prioritised energy security and your family finances over environmental dogma in our approach to net zero.
That's the bone he's throwing to the petty bourgeois rightists, by the way, who have made these guys have made some points about net zero, which is correct about the fact that it is arbitrary bullshit. But like their solution is throw money at the private sector, deregulate things, then somehow the private sector will build nuclear power stations. Of course, the nuclear power stations that are going to be built now or are scheduled to be built are having to be built with gigantic amounts of state money because guess what? The British capitalist class won't put their fucking hands in the pockets to build that because it's not profitable enough. Same way they let the nuclear industry fucking die in the first place is the same reason they won't invest in it now. Not profitable enough. The state will cover it and pass the costs on to the working class, as always.
We fully funded an increase in defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. We made
yeah, and most of that's just going to get blown on expensive antiques, basically, like the British nuclear sub-program, which is going to be dependent upon American hardware and software and is, of course, firing American-made missiles that we can't fire without the US president's say-so. So you are paying extra and billions upon billions of pounds for a farce, for a supposedly independent nuclear deterrent that isn't a deterrent and isn't independent. Again, like the British bourgeois power, British imperialism these days is like a hall of fucking mirrors.
A decision to invest more in local transport that you actually use, rather than endlessly plough more money into HS2.
If you're not familiar with what HS2 was, it was a stupid idea. It was this high-speed rail link between London and Manchester, which we don't need. I mean, if I want to go to London, I go to London every month now, once a month. And you can get there, depending upon what time of day it is, 2 hours 15, 2 hours 30. And that's like a 200-plus mile journey. It's not, if it's working, it's not bad. The price is fucking bad, but, you know, we're not talking about that for now. So the idea that it was going to shave, I think, half an hour off that journey so you could do London to Manchester in 90 minutes. Big deal. I mean, the idea of not spending gigantic amounts of money on that, but actually building up local transport services, well, that's not a bad idea. There's no evidence he's doing any of that, by the way, and I doubt they will either. There are genuine transport problems in this country, which involve the fact that you can't basically go anywhere in the countryside barely by using public transport. The railway network's pathetically inadequate for anything other than travel between like some of the major cities. So like if you have to commute anywhere off the beaten track, you of course have to use a car, and that's quite deliberate because they closed down a lot of the countryside and rural railway lines like 60 fucking years ago and never reopened them. So because the idea was everyone was going to drive everywhere, and it turns out that wasn't a good idea. So there you go. But the idea that these guys are going to tackle the transport problem, again, that's a fucking joke.
We set out a comprehensive plan to reform our welfare system, to make it fair.
Okay, like this is getting ridiculous now because there's so many lies, they're just mounting up. Look, it's Keir Starmer, by the way, will commit to roughly the same thing in just a moment. Welfare reform, if you're watching in the United States, you know what welfare reform means there. It means the same here. Basically, welfare reform in Britain means continually restricting the welfare system and trying to use the welfare system not to providing a sort of a bridge between different forms of employment if people are out of work, but to essentially compel people into low-wage work. That's what the welfare system is used for in this country. And to not just compel those who are physically capable of working, but those who are judged to be disabled, those who are judged to be unemployed due to long-term mental health problems. This is all dressed up in the phony language of empowerment, of course, but basically what they do is they employ crooked doctors to label somebody fit to work and try and push them into low-wage employment. The idea being quite basic. Increase the amount of people in the labour pool, increase the reserve army of labour, force down wages. That's what it's all about. Using the welfare system to ultimately force down the wages of everybody else by pushing more and more people into the labour force, increasing the amount of people in low-wage employment. That's what welfare reform actually means.
For those who pay for it, as well as those who need it. Immigration is finally coming down, and we are stopping the boats with our Rwanda partnership.
Right. They don't want to stop immigration. None of them do. This is the usual, like, standard bullshit you get from electioneering politicians in this country. There is no upper limit that they will ever place on immigration into Britain, just as there's no upper limit that they will ever place on it in the United States either. Both ruling classes need continued waves and waves of new migrant workers coming in to be hyper-exploitable labour, for a start, and also to act as new elements in the workforce that are more difficult to unionize, that are more transient, that are perhaps afraid of unionization. And they like it. They like the illegal labor as well, because or those with, shall we say, transitory or fragile status, because they can be very easily exploited and they can be very easily intimidated. The idea that they want to stop immigration is an absurd lie. They need it. The capitalist class needs it. They need more and more of it. Remember what I said a minute ago about how they're solving the staffing crisis in the health service, or trying to, by bringing in more migrant labor that can be, again, is more easy for them to exploit. They don't have to train people. They don't have to invest in actual training programs. They don't have to invest in having British people who might join a union do it. This is the farce, you know. And then when it becomes election time, they act like they're going to stop it. They posture and they gesture. We're going to send people to Rwanda and all that. The Rwanda policy is there to essentially terrorize those who are in the country on temporary visas, on whose work status could be revoked at any time. It's essentially a labor disciplining mechanism, just the same way that ICE is in the United States.
And we will ensure that the next generation grows up smoke-free.
Yeah, he's banning or severely restricting tobacco. That's his big idea. But of course, you know, I can name like 3 places within walking distance of here that you can go and get under-the-counter cigarettes, you know? It's very, very easy. Like, cigarette smuggling is going to boom.
I hope that my work since I became Prime Minister shows that we have a plan and are prepared to take bold action necessary for our country to flourish.
Yeah, he has a plan. It's the same plan Keir Starmer has. It's just that the ruling class have lost faith in the ability of the Tories to deliver upon it. And the plan is exactly what I said a minute ago. Reduce the wages of the working class to poverty level, reduce the working class to desperation, and then hopefully revive profitability by the reduction of the working class's wages and standards of living down to poverty level. That's the plan. Everything else is just noise.
Now, I've stuck with that plan and always been honest with you about what is needed, even when that's been difficult. Because I'm guided by doing what is right for our country, not what is easy.
Well, he's guided by doing what is right for his class. And of course, when politicians like him, who are very representative of the ruling class, talk about being guided by a vision of what is right, what they mean is they're serving their class interests. Simple.
I can't say the same thing for the Labour Party, because I don't know what they offer. And in truth, I don't think you know either.
And that's the first true thing he's said. That's the first accurate thing he said.
That's because they have no plan. There is no bold action. And as a result, the future can...
Well, he does have a plan. It's the same as your plan, Rishi. He's just being even less honest about it. Okay, you know what? Now he gets into the stupid electioneering bit, and there's no point listening to that. So we're going to remove Rishi from the action here. And now I'm going to give you something which is even worse. If you thought that was bad, witness Keir Starmer's Tony Blair impersonation.
The next general election. A moment the country needs and has been waiting for.
Okay, first of all, why on earth is he speaking from what appears to be the inside of an IKEA wardrobe? Very strange, and the sound quality is awful. Also, like, he's making the mistake of Keir Starmer is a naturally very, very boring man. He's a career state bureaucrat, and he keeps trying to appear interesting because he's very, very tedious to listen to. And so he makes the mistake that a lot of boring men do, which is like he'll start raising his voice to try and sound interesting. But he's just being boring at slightly higher volumes.
And where, by the force of our democracy, power returns to you.
I mean, this is just like ridiculous. I mean, he's got the 2 fucking Union Jacks either side of him. It's hard to tell like who's more ridiculous, him or like Rishi Sunak being pissed on by the Almighty. But I saw an advert for the Labour Party recently where he was marching around and there's like a Union Jack flag superimposed in the fucking background, and it looked like an early 2000s video done by the old British National Party, who are like the open fascists here. It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's like no one's going to be convinced by this at all, you know?
A chance to change for the better. Your future, your community, your country. Now, it will feel like a long campaign, I'm sure of that.
Well, it certainly fucking will if I have to listen to you every day, mate. Jesus Christ. I mean, I would literally rather listen to, like, the speeches of Joe Biden. That'd be funnier. This guy is a terrible, terrible public speaker. One of the worst I've ever seen.
But no matter what else is said and done, that opportunity for change is what this election is about.
No, it's not. What this election is about is the ruling class thinking, fuck, we need to really stick the boot in on the working class. Best call up the best people to do that, and that's the Labour Party. We'll explain more about that in just a moment.
In the course of the last 4 years, we've changed the Labour Party.
Yes, they have dropped the bullshit. I'll say that for him. He's stopped pretending that the Labour Party stands for anything other than exactly what the ruling class desire. So on that, Keir is actually telling the truth.
Returned it once more to the service of working people.
By the way, it was never in the service of the working class. Not 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, not 50 years ago, not 100 years ago. As a social democratic party, the Labour Party has been a dedicated servant of the British ruling class since its foundation. And really, that was especially confirmed after 1917. So in that sense, again, like, it's complete consistency what he's offering. Consistent lies as well.
All we ask now, humbly, is to do exactly the same for our country and return Britain to the service of working people.
Well, again, lie and unconvincingly delivered. I mean, you'd think after 4 years this guy could have found a better acting coach, but apparently some people are just naturally wouldn't. And whose idea was it to surround a man who strongly resembles a lump of wood with more wood? Jesus.
To that purpose, we offer why you should change Britain with Labour. One, because we will stop the chaos.
Wow, that's convincing. Tell us more about this chaos, Keir. I'm anxious to hear it.
Look around our country. The sewage in our rivers. People waiting on trolleys.
Right, okay. The sewage in the rivers thing. I will comment on that because he's right. There is sewage in the rivers. The privatized water companies dump human shit basically in the rivers across the country. They've been doing that for probably over 30 years. In fact, even when they were nationalized, like the region, it used to be that there used to be publicly owned regional water companies in Britain. They had a bad reputation for dumping like shit on public beaches and in the rivers 60 plus years ago. Like when my parents were kids, they had a reputation for dumping sewage on the beach. So they've been doing this for a long time. It's not a new thing. The other thing, they've got worse with it. It's made to look worse, and indeed is, because of course they're doing this whilst the water infrastructure falls apart, whilst there's droughts if there's like a week of reasonably hot sunshine, because for the last 35 years the water companies have been privatized. The population has grown, and none of them have built any new reservoirs. So that's why we end up with more droughts. They also haven't invested significantly in improving the sewerage. So those problems are real. But again, his Labour Party is just as responsible for it as the Conservatives are, because they spent 13 years in office between 1997 and 2010 defending privatisation. And Keir Starmer won't commit to actually nationalising the water companies again, to invest in them, and the only proper solution would be nationalisation without any compensation to the parasites that own them, because they haven't invested anything for 30 plus years. He won't do that. He'll just talk about it. He'll use it as a cheap point to score against Sunak. But again, his party is every bit as responsible as the Conservatives are for this.
Is in A&E, crime virtually unpunished, mortgages and food prices through the roof. It's all, every bit of it, a direct result of the Tory chaos in Westminster.
Well, no, it's a direct result of things that you've supported, Sir Keir. So let's just go through that bit by bit. Like he talks about mortgage prices, mortgage payments going through the roof. Well, that's because essentially the government just reinflated the housing bubble, essentially. A housing bubble, which, by the way, Sir Keir would do exactly the same thing to reinflate all over again. Because, again, it's like one of the only ideas that the ruling class has to revive British capitalism is to reinflate the housing bubble. It's why, by the way, that neither Keir Starmer nor Rishi Sunak will invest seriously in the building of public housing, because again that would damage the profits of the property developers and the banks who have been behind the privatization of public housing for over 40 years. So again, he's talking about things and offering no solutions. He's talking about crises in in terms of prices, in terms of energy bills, which of course come from policies he supported. He supported all the sanctions that were placed on Russian energy enthusiastically. He's a rabid supporter of the American war on Ukraine. And I think that's the proper way to describe it. It is an American war on Ukraine, and it's a war that Keir Starmer enthusiastically supports. So all the things he's identifying here, all the problems, they've been caused by things that he has supported or that his party has supported for years.
Time and again, they pursue their own interests rather than tackling the issues that affect your family. And if they get another 5 years, they will feel entitled to carry on exactly as they are. Nothing will change.
Nothing will change with you either. It'll be the same plan, just delivered with an even less convincing actor at the helm.
A vote for Labour is a vote for stability, economic and political. A politics that treads more lightly on all our lives. A vote to stop the chaos. 2, because it's time for change.
Indeed it is, Sir Keir. So in that case, why are you running on the same platform as Rishi Sunak? I mean, Keir Starmer has, again, I will re-emphasise this point, every significant decision that the government made, going all the way back to the time of the COVID lockdowns, Keir Starmer supported. So in that sense, nothing will change is exactly right.
Our offer is to reset both our economy and our politics, so that they once again
Meaningless phrases alert. There's a lot of them in this speech.
serve the interests of working people.
Every time he says working people and serving the interests of, he's lying, and you can tell he's lying. Maybe that's why he's trying to hide behind 2 Union Jacks, to obscure the obvious lies.
We totally reject the Tory view that economic strength is somehow gifted from those at the top.
Well, he doesn't reject that view at all, because he's been doing nothing but pandering to the most parasitic elements of the British ruling class. And that's why, of course, even some of his pet union leaders, like Sharon Graham of Unite, have briefly objected to the fact that even the very, very minimal changes to workers' rights were all dropped in order to please the people at the top that he's just uttered some faux criticism of. So again, nothing he says can be taken seriously.
Over the past 14 years, through all the crises we've had to face, sticking with that idea has left our country exposed, insecure, and unable to unlock the potential of every community. But a vote for Labour is a vote to turn the page on all that. A vote for change. And finally, 3, because we have a long-term plan to rebuild Britain.
You notice how both of them are saying roughly the same things. I mean, Starmer says it's a vote for change, but he's now going to go on babble on in the same way that Sunak did about how he's got a plan. I've got a plan, It's not a very good one. At least this is not the plan. The plan he actually has and the plan he's trying to sell are 2 different things.
A plan that is ready to go, fully costed, And
I'm going to have to pause there because this fully costed thing is just absolutely fucking, it's bullshit. This became like a thing after 2010 when David Cameron was like attacking Ed Miliband for, as he said, that Labour were reckless spenders. And all of his programs were fully costed and it wouldn't be adding to the government debt. Of course, it was all a lie. Like the Tories added massively to the government debt. They always do, both through the spending commitments they made and via, of course, the endless money printing that they engaged in, both Labour and the Tories. So, like, this was all bullshit. This idea that we're going to balance the budget, we've fully costed our plans to make sure we don't do any new borrowing. It's all garbage. They all borrow massively. They will all switch on the money printer again whenever the ruling class demand it. This is just garbage to justify, essentially, not meeting the demands of the working class. That's what it's about. For the Tories, it's a talking point they use against the Labour Party. For the Labour Party, it's a talking point they use against the working class, saying, well, we can't necessarily do anything because it wouldn't be fully costed. That's my Keir Starmer impression. I am working on it.
fully funded. We can deliver economic stability, cut the NHS waiting times, secure our borders with a new border security command, harness.
So his big idea for the last couple of weeks is that he's going to further militarize the border, essentially, but with a new border force. There's not just, you don't just need one border force or two border force. It's 3 border forces or 4 or possibly 5. So his plan is more border militarization. So Sunak's plan is threaten to deport people to Rwanda. Starmer's plan is border militarization. So this is the choices that we have, and it goes towards all the same thing, which is about bringing the labour in from overseas, but making sure it's labour that can be terrified into submission and more easily exploitable.
It's great British energy to cut your bills for good.
Okay, this is another piece of bullshit, because he's not actually threatening what he should be threatening if he was being remotely serious, which is to nationalise the gas, electricity and water companies without compensation. That would be a threat worth making. But what he's talking about, setting up Great British Energy, it's going to be essentially a government funding for like bullshit renewable energy projects, which he's claiming will then cut domestic energy bills. They won't, because he's not doing anything to actually tackle the providers of energy, or the companies that sell energy to ordinary people in this country. So he's doing nothing to tackle the private energy companies. He's just setting up this fucking bullshit institution, which is there to hand out funds to people running renewable energy scams. That's what he's doing. Won't cut fucking bills for people at home at all. So it's a scam.
Tackle antisocial behaviour and get the teachers we need in your children's classroom.
The teachers we need will probably be AI assistants that he buys from Elon Musk.
But most importantly of all, we do all this with a new spirit of service. Country first, party second. A rejection of the gesture.
Oh, by the way, that was Ed Miliband's slogan. That was one of Ed Miliband's slogans nearly 10 years ago now, 9 years ago, May 2015. Ed Miliband, by the way, tried all the same tricks and he was slightly more charismatic than Keir Starmer. I'll give him that. He tried all the same tricks with like festooning the every event he went to with like Union Jack flags. He commissioned this idiotic project called Blue Labour about putting patriotism back into the Labour Party, because the Labour Party's always been a rabid imperialist party, a rabid party of British bourgeois nationalism. So that's never changed. All these like garbage phrases that he's using, Ed Miliband tried them 9 years ago, and it didn't work for him. And he had his promises carved into granite as well.
Politics you will see in this campaign, I have no doubt, from the Tories and the SNP.
He mentions the Scottish nationalists there, by the way, because if Labour's to stand any chance of winning, they have to win a lot of seats off the SNP in Scotland. They may get a few because the SNP have disgraced themselves and crashed their independence project into the rocks and succumbed to a gargantuan amount of corruption and scandals. But the former SNP leader, Alex Salmond's party, called ALBA, which is, of course, the Gaelic word for Scotland, might actually pick up some of the seats. So he desperately needs seats in Scotland, but Labour as a party in Scotland remain toxic, and they're not going to get the number of votes that they need up there to secure a majority.
I'm well aware of the cynicism people hold towards politicians at the moment. But I came into politics late, having served our country as leader of the Crown Prosecution Service.
Right. If you're head of the Crown Prosecution Service, which is the state body that deals with prosecuting alleged criminals in this country, as Starmer was head of the CPS, you're a politician. You're a political figure. I mean, it's an interesting election on that note, because Rishi Sunak actually comes from the ruling class. He wasn't born into it, but he became a member of it. And so he, in that sense, accurately represents the sort of the finance wing of the ruling class. Starmer represents the state bureaucracy, because that's where he's made his career, his entire career. He's not like an ace lawyer or anything like that. I mean, can you fucking believe that this wooden clown would be particularly compelling in a courtroom? I doubt it. Or could even build a decent argument? I doubt it. But his only real talent is for shimmying his way up the managerial greasy pole. And so he managed to scheme and plot his way to the top of the prosecution service. And so he's, as others have chronicled, and like Declassified UK have done this. There was a book by a guy called Oliver Eagleton, which chronicled his time at the prosecution service as well. So Starmer is a career state bureaucrat with extensive links to the intelligence services of both Britain and the United States, who has been on the Council of Foreign Relations, who loves spending his time at Davos. So this guy is like a transatlantic intelligence services asset. That's who he is. And so this is the character that leads the Labour Party, entirely appropriately, by the way. So when he's going on about service to the country and all that, just remember who he is. This guy is a career-long asset of the British state bureaucracy and the US state bureaucracy.
And I helped the police service in Northern Ireland to gain the consent of all communities.
They are still an occupying force, by the way. The occupied 6 counties are still occupied by the British state, and the police service of Northern Ireland, PSNI, is essentially a rebranded RUC.
Service of our country is the reason and the only reason why I am standing here now asking for your vote.
Well, no, you're standing here now, Keir, because the ruling class decided that you would be their chosen weapon to wield against the working class. Fortunately for us, you're rather unconvincing and not very good at this. So in terms of the election and how it goes, the more people will see of him, the less likely he is to win. And that's why him being there is positive.
And I believe with patience, determination, and that commitment to service, there is so much pride and potential we can unlock across our country. So here it is, the future of the country.
You see, even he's laughing at the rhetoric now. He can't contain himself. Even he's now finding himself ridiculous.
In your hands. On the 4th of July, you have the choice. And together, we can stop the chaos, we can turn the page, we can start to rebuild Britain and change our country. Thank you.
Right, I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did, because that was absolutely fucking awful. My God. I think I would love to see Alex Jones do a breakdown of that, because that was like barely fucking human. Anyway, that's the man who would be king, so to speak, to quote Rudyard Kipling. That was truly abysmal. I apologize for inflicting that upon you, dear viewers, but you had to see just what is on offer here through bourgeois democracy. And I want to deal with a comment that was made here from Mutanda, saying that the electorate have been subtly groomed by the state to favour him over the last 4 years. Yeah, it hasn't worked. Hasn't worked because, the level of support for the Labour Party is not adequate to the task that the ruling class have set out for them. The ruling class want, and this is why you're seeing these gigantic leads for Labour in the polls. It is not based on enthusiasm or a wave of popular support for them. At best, it's based on the fact that people despise the Conservative Party, quite rightly so. But again, as the local election results showed, there is not a tidal wave of enthusiasm there for the Labour Party. They just about managed to create one in 1997. They managed to create one for a variety of reasons. But again, we're a long time away from that now. That was 27 years ago. Keir Starmer he's not a good actor. He's nowhere near the level of performance that would be required to sell that bullshit convincingly. He's a terrible presence on camera. He's incredibly wooden. He's incredibly unlikable and uncharismatic. Now, Blair's a blood-soaked sociopath who would, drink blood on camera if he could. But he was, back in his day, good at delivering the lines in a convincing fashion, just like Bill Clinton, just like Barack Obama. Starmer is trying really hard to seem statesmanlike, and the more he tries, the worse he looks. So what's probably going to happen is that the election, when it comes, will deliver a Labour majority, maybe not even a majority. They will be the single largest party. But I doubt they will have enough to form the stable government the ruling class are looking for. The reason why the ruling class are bringing in Keir Starmer as the leader of the Labour Party is that they want to have Keir Starmer with a big majority in order that he can carry through the attacks on the working class in this country and, of course, the strengthening of British imperialism overseas, that they don't regard Sunak and the rather discredited Tories as being capable of doing anymore. The problem is that, again, the trick isn't working. Yes, Labour will probably come out with a good deal more votes than the Tories. They will come out with more seats than the Tories. But there will also be, I think, an awful lot of splitting of the vote. The Tories will lose votes, but they'll lose them to the right-wing alternative, which is the Reform Party, which is led by some idiot called Richard Tice. It's sort of associated with Nigel Farage. It's kind of like the heir to UKIP. So they'll pick up a considerable number of ex-Tory votes. Those votes won't go to the Labour Party. To the left of the Labour Party, and I should say I'm not endorsing the thing I'm about to tell you about, they'll lose a lot of votes to the Greens. Now, I would never vote for the fucking Green Party in my life, but they are draining away the petty bourgeois left base that the Labour Party used to be able to rely on. The petty bourgeois left base in Scotland went to largely the SNP. It will probably migrate away from them a little bit and go to Alba. Some might come back to Labour, but a bit more will go to the Scottish Greens. They will lose that vote in England to largely the Greens. So the Greens will probably pick up at least one seat, maybe two, possibly more. They'll lose a fair bit in some of the working class communities. Not the gigantic amount that George Galloway is looking for, but they'll lose a fair bit to the Workers' Party of Britain as well. Whether Galloway can hang on to that Rochdale seat is another question. But Labour will thus not get the votes needed to build a massive majority. Now, I could be wrong on this, but I just don't see, no matter how hard the bourgeois press work to present Starmer as this great leader, it's not going to stick. Because anybody who watches that, or even 30 seconds of that, is just going to think, well, who the fuck is that? Don't have to be a Marxist, don't have to be any kind of clued up political observer, But just the looking at those two gimps speaking just now, if anything, Sunak was the slightly more convincing of them. And I think that the Tories election gurus have looked at it and thought, Starmer's not convincing. We can probably do a decent job controlling the damage here. The polls are way over the top. Even Sky News had to admit recently that the Labour Party will come out as the largest party, but won't be able to run a government without a coalition partner. Now, to a certain extent, if the Liberals are able to revive themselves, that's the Liberal Democratic Party in this country. Nowhere near as interesting as the late Vladimir Zhirinovsky's party, by the way. They were formerly the coalition partner of the Tories. If they revive, then it could be that we get a Labour-Liberal coalition. That would be Starmer's preference, I think. And if they were able to put that together, that might be solid. But then again, there's no reason to believe that the Liberals will undergo any particularly large revival. So what we'll get, I think, is, Starmer's going on about, oh, stop the chaos, stop the chaos. I think we'll get more of it. I think that they'll scrape in by being the single largest party, maybe in coalition with the Liberals, maybe even with the Greens. Never rule out the Green parties and any Green party's capacity to completely reverse course and sell out all the things they say they believe in. So this is the situation we find ourselves in. A British capitalist economy in a deep, long-lasting crisis. The ruling class is unable to find a way out. Desperate to have a strong government with enough credibility amongst the petty bourgeoisie and enough of the working class that they can stick the boot in on the rest of the working class and get away with it. I think that the sole objective that I would say would be worthy of pursuit in this particular election would be that the desires of the ruling class to attain for themselves a stable bourgeois government. We should work to deny that as far as we possibly can. Starmer keeps saying, I'm going to stop the chaos, and that's clearly the talking point he's been given by the advisors provided to him by the ruling class. We should then ensure that chaos stays, that chaos gets worse, that whatever government gets in is weak and is unable to carry through the attacks on the working class with any degree of authority, that can easily be pushed around, that can easily be mobilized against. That's what we need. We absolutely do not need, it is, in my view, we have to be quite bold about this and say to people, the last thing the British working class needs is a strong government composed of these people. If we end up with a lot of independents in there, that's certainly possible. If we end up even with bigger Scottish nationalist, who I place no faith in whatsoever, or Greens, or even some Reform MPs in there, then again, the more chaotic we can make it after the election, the better it will be. The absolute last thing we need is a strong government led by Sir Keir Starmer, because Sir Keir Starmer is an infinitely more dangerous figure than Rishi Sunak is. He is a rabid servant of British imperialism. He is a rabid enemy of the working class. And, of course, he has been for his entire miserable career. He is chomping at the bit to carry out the attacks on the working class, dressed up in progressive language, of course. And the trade union leaders are queuing up to help him, of course, just as the trade union leaders in the United States are queuing up to help Union Buster Biden. And of course, as Maro in the chat has reminded us, Starmer is an enthusiastic supporter of the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people. So this is the monstrosity we're being asked to choose between. And out of the two of them, again, Rishi Sunak is actually the less dangerous option in some respects. But we must do whatever we can, in whatever small way we can, to prevent Sir Keir Starmer coming out with a big majority. If he has to win, let it be with a small minority government that can't do anything and can't govern effectively. The last thing we need, the last thing the working class in this country needs, is a so-called strong government. Right, okay, so I hope you enjoyed that tour through the tortured imaginations of Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. As it's now election season, we will, of course, be having to devote more time to their foul utterances. I always vow to keep it as interesting as I possibly can, though. So, thanks to everybody who's tuned in for this evening's programme. I hope you all at least found some entertainment value in the listening to those two bozos blather on for an interminable amount of time. It's amazing how much bullshit two men can fit into a combined speech length of 12 minutes, but there you go. And I hope you can join us tomorrow, which is where we'll be coming back to you with more on the Stalin series, which will be a much more uplifting spectacle than this particular program. But again, I hope that you found some educational value in here. So I will be back again with you same time tomorrow, 10:30. Hope you can join me then. And until I join you then, I will say good night.
Amen.